They say geography is destiny, right? Well, today we're diving straight into India's fascinating spatial reality to see exactly what that means. In this explainer, we aren't just looking at lines on a map. We're translating those borders into real-world impacts. Things like extreme climate variations, mind-bending time zone puzzles, and deep strategic connectivity. So, if you've ever wondered how a nation's literal location on the globe dictates its everyday reality, you are absolutely in the right place.
To wrap our heads around this, we're going to break it down. We'll start big with India's global footprint, map out its geographic extremes, solve a rather massive time zone puzzle, and then zoom back out to check out its unique regional identity and neighborhood. All right, part 1, India's global footprint. Let's look at the macro scale to truly grasp India's place in the world. 3.28 million square kilometers. Just let that sink in for a second. That single number accounts for almost 2.5% of the entire world's landmass. It makes India the 7th largest country on the planet. It is an absolutely massive geographic canvas, and honestly, that sheer size is exactly what endows the country with such incredible physical diversity, from towering mountains to expansive deserts. Moving on to part 2, mapping the extremes. Let's zoom in and look at the geographic grid. Looking at the mainland, you've got a stretch all the way from Kashmir, high up in the north, straight down to Kanyakumari in the south. And east to west, it spans from Arunachal Pradesh all the way across to Gujarat. But here's the thing, a country's footprint doesn't just stop at the beach. India's territorial limits actually push out into the ocean by 12 nautical miles. That's about 22 kilometers extending right out into the sea. Now, I absolutely love this geographic quirk. If you measure the latitudinal spread, top to bottom, and the longitudinal spread, side to side, they are both right around 30 degrees. Pretty neat, right? But check this out. The actual physical distance north to south is over 3,200 kilometers, which is noticeably longer than the east to west distance of roughly 2,900 kilometers. Why? Well, it's just the beautiful math of living on a globe. While lines of latitude stay perfectly parallel, lines of longitude literally converge as they get closer to the poles. And that 30-degree latitudinal spread, it's not just some trivia fact, it literally dictates daily life. Because the southern tip dips down to about 8 degrees north, it is firmly planted in the warm tropics. But up north, you're stretching right into the subtropical or warm-temperate zone. This specific positioning is the engine driving the country's crazy variations in landforms, climates, soil types, and vegetation. It's the reason you can have that lush, equatorial vibe in the south and literal alpine snow in the north, all within one single national border. Okay, Section 3, the time zone puzzle. Let's see what 30 degrees of longitude actually does to a clock. So, thanks to that massive east-west spread, there is a literal time gap of about 2 hours across the country. Picture this. People in northeastern states like Nagaland are sipping their morning tea in broad, full daylight, while folks way out west in Rajasthan are still sound asleep in the pitch dark. But if they both look at their phones, they show the exact same time.
So how do you solve that? Well, instead of slicing the country up into a bunch of different time zones like they do in the US, India went with unity. They picked a single standard meridian at exactly 82 degrees 30 minutes east. That one line dictates Indian Standard Time, or IST, for the entire nation. And on a global scale, it locks India in at exactly 5.5 hours ahead of GMT. It's honestly a really smart compromise between geographic reality and administrative cohesion. Which brings us to part 4, the Indian subcontinent, and its completely unique physical identity. All those extreme borders, varying climates and terrains we just talked about, they forge a massive regional bloc that really stands apart from the rest of Asia. We call it the Indian subcontinent, and it includes 5 modern countries: Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and of course India. It's essentially boxed in by the lofty Himalayas up north, the Hindu Kush and Suleiman ranges to the northwest, the Purvachal Hills in the northeast, and then just completely surrounded by the Indian Ocean down south. It's incredibly interconnected inside, but physically insulated from the outside. And we really can't overstate the historical weight of those northern mountains. For centuries, the Himalayas and surrounding ranges acted as this ultimate formidable barrier. I mean, they were virtually impassable, except for a few really treacherous gaps like the Khyber, Bolan, and Nathula passes. That intense physical isolation is exactly what allowed the subcontinent to develop such a distinct, unique regional identity, kind of living in its own cultural bubble, away from the wider Asian continent. But then,
Contrasting those towering mountains, you have this absolutely massive coastline, 7,517 kilometers of it, wrapping around the peninsula. And keep in mind, that number isn't just the mainland coast. It crucially includes the vital island chains too. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal and Lakshadweep over in the Arabian Sea. That immense coastline completely diversifies the land and is a total game changer for access to maritime resources.
All right, final section, neighbors and strategic links. Let's look at India's position in the wider context of Asia.
So we've talked about how geography isolated India, but let's look at how it connects it. India's maritime location in South-Central Asia is perfectly strategic. The peninsular shape literally juts right out into the Indian Ocean, splitting it into two arms, the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. That specific shape provides phenomenal vital sea and air route links to neighboring regions. It places India dead center on the major transit highways connecting the eastern world to the west.
And while there are obvious land borders up north, out in the ocean water, India shares super close proximity with two key island neighbors. Down to the south and slightly west, you've got the Maldives. And right off the southeastern coast is Sri Lanka. Fun fact about Sri Lanka, it's separated from the Indian mainland by this very narrow but incredibly vital maritime boundary made up of the Gulf of Mannar and the Palk Strait.
So as we wrap up this explainer, seeing all these modern air and sea routes easily overriding ancient mountains and vast oceans, it leaves us with something pretty provocative to chew on. We spent a lot of time today seeing how the Himalayas historically isolated this entire region. But today, with global trade, massive aviation routes, and instant digital connectivity, do these massive physical barriers even dictate a nation's destiny anymore? Or have we finally just conquered our geography? It's a huge question, and definitely one to think about. Thanks for exploring this chapter with me.